I want to share something with you today that changed everything I understood about money, wealth and prosperity. For years I struggled. I watched my father work 16-hour days in our small family business, barely making ends meet, and I promised myself I would find a different path. But by the time I was 35, I was drowning in debt, watching opportunities slip through my fingers, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake choosing a life of study over immediate income. Then one evening, during a particularly dark moment in my life, I opened an ancient text that my grandfather had given me before he passed away. What I discovered on those yellowed pages wasn't just wisdom. It was a complete financial blueprint that the wealthiest families in Jewish history had used for generations. And I'm going to share every detail with you today because this knowledge was never meant to be hidden. Let me tell you about David Goldstein. David came to me 3 years ago, absolutely broken. He was 58 years old, facing foreclosure on his home, with $17,000 in credit card debt and barely $300 in his checking account. He sat in my study with tears in his eyes and said, "Rabbi, I've worked my entire life. Where did I go wrong?" I looked at him and said, "David, you didn't do anything morally wrong, but you never learned the ancient principles that could have changed everything." 6 months later, David called me from a vacation in Italy, something he thought he'd never afford. Within 18 months, he had eliminated his debt completely. Today, he owns 3 rental properties and has begun teaching these same principles to his grandchildren. What changed? David discovered what I'm about to reveal to you right now. The secret isn't complicated, but it requires us to completely shift how we think about money. You see, in the Talmud, in Bava Metzia 42a, there's a teaching that most people have never encountered. It says, "Let a man always divide his money into 3 parts, a third in land, a third in business, and a third in cash." When I first read this passage as a young rabbi, I didn't understand its power. This wasn't just spiritual advice. This was the exact formula that built some of the greatest fortunes in human history. The Rothschilds understood this. The Guggenheims knew this. Every major Jewish family that created generational wealth followed this ancient principle of diversification, written down more than 2,000 years ago, long before any modern financial advisor was born. But here's what shocked me the most. This principle wasn't created for the wealthy. It was created for people who were struggling, for families barely surviving, for anyone who wanted to break free from financial bondage. The rabbis understood something profound. Wealth isn't about how much you earn. It's about how you manage what you have. I've met people earning $200,000 a year who are bankrupt, and I've met people earning $40,000 who are building real wealth. The difference isn't income, it's wisdom. Let me break this down for you in the simplest way possible. When the Talmud says a third in land, it's talking about stability, assets that hold value over time, real estate, tangible things that appreciate. When it says a third in business, it means active income, entrepreneurship, investment in growth opportunities where your money works for you. And when it says a third in cash, it means liquidity, having reserves for emergencies, for opportunities, for peace of mind. This is the foundation. This is where it all begins. But most people get it completely wrong because they put everything in one place. They buy a house and have nothing liquid. They start a business and have no safety net. They keep everything in cash and watch inflation destroy their purchasing power year after year. I made these mistakes myself. In my early 30s, I invested everything I had into one business venture, a friend's startup that promised incredible returns. Within 9 months, the business collapsed. I lost $32,000, which was everything I had saved. I was devastated. I felt like a failure. But that failure taught me something invaluable. The wisdom of our ancestors wasn't theoretical. It was born from centuries of persecution, displacement, and having to rebuild from nothing over and over again. Jewish families survived because they understood diversification wasn't optional. It was essential for survival. Now let me tell you about Maria. Maria isn't Jewish. She's a Catholic woman from Brazil who found one of my talks online. She sent me a message 2 years ago describing her situation. She was 43 years old, working 2 jobs, sending money back to her family, with less than $500 in savings. She said, "Rabbi, I feel trapped. I'll never own anything. I'll never stop working." I wrote back and told her about the rule of thirds. She started small, incredibly small. She took $50 from each paycheck and divided it. $17 into a high-yield savings account, $17 into a fractional real estate investment platform, and $16 into a low-cost index fund. $50 doesn't sound like much, does it? But here's what happened. After 12 months, she had $600 saved, her investments had grown to $730, and she had enough confidence to ask for a raise at her primary job, which she received. After 24 months, her net worth had increased by $11,000. That's not a miracle. That's mathematics combined with ancient wisdom. Today, Maria teaches financial literacy to immigrant families in her community, and she always starts with the rule of thirds. But here's something most people miss entirely. The ancient Jewish wealth secret isn't just about dividing your money. It's about something much deeper. It's about a concept called Tzedakah, which most people translate as charity. But that's not quite right. Tzedakah means righteousness, justice. It's the principle that giving away wealth actually creates more wealth. I know how this sounds. When I first learned this, I thought, how can giving money away make me richer? That's mathematically impossible. But then I looked at the data. Jews represent approximately 2 to 3% of the United States population, yet they contribute roughly 25% of all philanthropic donations in the country. And here's the paradox. Jewish communities are among the most financially successful in history. Why? The Talmud addresses this directly. In Tractate Shabbat 119a, the rabbis ask, why are the Jews of the land of Israel wealthy? The answer given, because they give so much to Tzedakah. This isn't folklore. This is a proven spiritual and psychological principle. When you give, you create an abundance mindset. You tell yourself, I have enough to share. That mental shift changes everything about how you approach opportunity, risk, and growth. Maimonides, one of the greatest Jewish philosophers who ever lived, said it explicitly, anyone who gives tzedakah will never be poor, and anyone who gives will never lack resources. I've tested this principle in my own life hundreds of times. Even during my worst financial periods, I continued to give 10% of whatever I earned. There were months where 10% meant just $50, but I gave it. And I watched time and time again as unexpected opportunities appeared. A consulting project, a speaking engagement, a chance meeting that led to a new income stream. Some people call this luck. I call it the spiritual mathematics of generosity. Let me give you something practical you can do right now, today, within the next 72 hours. First, take out a piece of paper and write down your current financial reality. How much do you earn per month? How much do you have in savings? How much debt do you carry? Be honest, this isn't about judgment, it's about clarity. Second, decide on an amount you can dedicate to the rule of thirds. Even if it's just $30 a month, $10 in each category. Start there. Open a high-yield savings account online. It takes 15 minutes. Put your cash portion there. Find a low-cost investment platform and put your business portion into a diversified index fund. And take your land portion and research fractional real estate investment opportunities, or simply start saving toward a down payment on property. Third, commit to giving. Take 10% of whatever amount you're working with and give it to a cause you believe in, a local charity, a family in need, a community organization. Do this for 90 days and track what happens. I'm telling you, you will see a shift. Not because this is magic, but because you're aligning yourself with principles that have created wealth for thousands of years. Now I need to address something critical. Many people fail with wealth building because they make 3 catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake is waiting for the perfect time. They say, when I earn more, then I'll start saving. When I get that promotion, then I'll invest. But that day never comes. There is no perfect time. The perfect time is right now with whatever you have. In the Torah, in Deuteronomy 8:18, it says, remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the power to acquire wealth. Notice it doesn't say when you have enough or when conditions are perfect. It says He gives you the power, present tense, right now. The second mistake is trying to get rich quickly. People chase cryptocurrency trends, day trading, gambling, schemes that promise fast returns. Proverbs 21:5 warns us directly, the plans of the diligent lead to profit, but hasty action leads to poverty. Our ancestors understood that real wealth is built slowly, consistently, through patience and discipline. The third mistake is hoarding everything for yourself. This is the trap that destroys generational wealth. When you hoard, you create scarcity consciousness. You become fearful, anxious, unable to see opportunities because you're protecting what little you have. But when you give, you create flow. You tell the universe, I trust there will be more. And there always is. I want to share a story that demonstrates this perfectly. There was a man named Yitzchak who lived in my grandfather's village in Poland before World War II. Yitzchak was not wealthy by any means. He was a tailor who made just enough to feed his family. But every Friday before Shabbat, without fail, he would give 10% of his weekly earnings to help orphans in the community. People thought he was foolish. They said, Yitzchak, you can barely afford bread for your own children. Why are you giving away money? He would smile and say, because God has always provided, and he always will. Years passed. Yitzchak's children grew up watching their father's generosity. They internalized this principle. When they immigrated to America after the war, each of his 3 children started small businesses. They followed their father's example, working diligently, saving consistently, diversifying their investments, and always giving 10% away. By the 3rd generation, Yitzchak's grandchildren had built a family worth over $80 million. They owned manufacturing plants, real estate holdings across 4 states, and a charitable foundation that has donated more than $12 million to educational programs. All of this traced back to a tailor who gave 10% of his earnings when he barely had enough to survive. Now you might be thinking, Rabbi, that's a beautiful story, but my situation is different. I have student loans, I have medical bills, I'm supporting elderly parents, I don't have anything to work with. I hear this all the time and I want to say something directly to you. Your situation is not unique, it's universal. Every single person who has built wealth started exactly where you are, feeling trapped, overwhelmed, convinced that prosperity was for other people. But here's what I've learned from working with hundreds of individuals over the past 2 decades. The difference between those who break free and those who stay trapped is not their starting point, it's their decision to begin. I've seen people with 6-figure debt turn their lives around. I've seen single mothers working minimum wage jobs create investment portfolios for their children. I've seen immigrants arrive with nothing and retire as millionaires. The common thread: they all started with wisdom before they had wealth. Let me teach you one more ancient principle that changed everything for me personally. In Jewish tradition, there's a concept called ma'aser, which means a tenth. This comes from Deuteronomy 14:22-29, where we're instructed to set aside 10% of our income. Most people think this is just about religious obligation, but it's actually brilliant financial psychology. When you commit to giving away 10% immediately, you force yourself to live on 90%. This creates automatic discipline. You can't overspend because you've already allocated that 10% elsewhere. But here's the deeper wisdom: that 10% isn't a loss. It's an investment in your character, your community, and your spiritual balance. The rabbis understood that a person who gives regularly develops generosity as a character trait, and generous people attract opportunities, partnerships, and blessings that closed-fisted people never experience. I practice this myself, still, to this day. Every month, the first check I write is 10% of my income to charity. Some months that's a substantial amount. Other months it's modest. But it's always first, before my mortgage, before my utilities, before anything else, I give. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that this practice has returned to me 100 times over. Not in some mystical way, but in concrete opportunities. Speaking engagements that came from connections I made through charitable work, consulting clients who found me through community involvement, partnerships that formed because I was present in spaces where generous people gather. This is how the spiritual and the practical intersect. This is the ancient secret that built $600 billion fortunes. Not greed, not exploitation, but generosity combined with wisdom. Let me address something else that's crucial. Some of you are thinking, this is all very inspiring, Rabbi, but I'm not Jewish. Does this apply to me? Let me be absolutely clear. These principles are universal. They're rooted in Jewish texts, because that's my tradition, that's where I learned them. But the wisdom itself transcends any single religion. I've taught these principles to Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, atheists. It doesn't matter. Truth is truth, regardless of who speaks it. When the Talmud teaches diversification, that's not a Jewish principle. It's a mathematical principle that our ancestors understood 2,000 years ago. When Maimonides talks about generosity leading to prosperity, he's describing a psychological and spiritual law that applies to every human being on earth. So please, take what resonates with you. Adapt it to your own faith, your own context, your own life. The wisdom works because it's based on human nature and economic reality, not because of religious exclusivity. Here's what I want you to do in the next 7 days. Take the principle of thirds and apply it to your time, not just your money. Divide your week into 3 categories: 1/3 for earning, 1/3 for learning, and 1/3 for relationships and rest. Most people spend all their time earning and wonder why they feel empty and trapped. But when you dedicate time to learning, reading, studying, developing new skills, you increase your earning potential exponentially. And when you invest time in relationships and rest, you build the emotional and physical foundation that allows you to sustain success over decades, not just months. This is holistic wealth. This is what our ancestors understood. They didn't separate financial success from spiritual health, from family strength, from community contribution. Everything was integrated, and that's why their wealth lasted for generations, while so many modern fortunes collapse within a single lifetime. I remember a conversation I had with a man named Robert, a successful attorney who came to me 5 years ago. Robert was earning over $300,000 a year, but he was miserable. He barely saw his children. His marriage was falling apart. He had stomach ulcers from stress. He said, "Rabbi, I have money, but I have no life. What am I doing wrong?" I asked him a simple question. "When was the last time you gave 10% away?" He looked at me confused and said, "I donate at the end of the year for tax purposes." I said, "That's not giving. That's accounting. When was the last time you gave because someone needed help, not because you needed a deduction?" He couldn't answer. I challenged him to try something radical. For 90 days, give 10% of his income away immediately, without thinking about tax benefits. And in that same 90 days, dedicate 2 hours every evening to his family with no phone, no work, no distractions. He thought I was crazy, but he was desperate enough to try. 3 months later, Robert called me and said, "I don't understand what happened, but everything changed. My wife and I are talking again. My kids actually want to spend time with me. And somehow, even though I'm working fewer hours, I closed 2 major cases I wasn't even expecting." This is what balance creates. This is what generosity unleashes. It's not magic, it's alignment. Let me give you the second practical exercise you can start today. Create what I call a wisdom journal. Every single day for the next 30 days, write down 3 things. First, one financial decision you made that day, no matter how small. Did you buy coffee? Did you save $5? Did you skip an unnecessary purchase? Second, write down one thing you learned that day that could increase your value in the marketplace. A skill, a concept, a connection. Third, write down one act of generosity you performed, even if it's just holding a door, giving a genuine compliment, or donating $2. At the end of 30 days, you will have a record of 90 decisions, 90 learning moments, and 90 generous acts. This practice will transform your consciousness. You'll start seeing opportunities everywhere because you've trained your brain to look for them. You'll start feeling abundant because you've documented evidence of your own growth and giving. This is ancient wisdom applied through modern practice. Now I want to talk about something that might make some people uncomfortable, but it's necessary. There's a reason why Jewish communities have historically achieved disproportionate financial success. And it's not genetics, it's not conspiracy, it's cultural commitment to education. In Jewish tradition, the highest value is placed on learning. The Torah, the Talmud, centuries of rabbinic literature, all of it emphasizes study, questioning, debate, intellectual growth. This creates a culture where children grow up understanding that knowledge is the greatest asset you can possess. It can't be stolen, it can't be taxed, it can't be lost in a market crash. When you invest in your own education and the education of your children, you're building wealth that compounds across generations. My grandfather used to say, "They can take your house, they can take your business, they can take your gold, but they can never take what you know." He spoke from experience. He survived the Holocaust by using his knowledge of languages to work as a translator. That knowledge saved his life and allowed him to rebuild everything from nothing when he came to America. So here's what I'm telling you. Read, study, learn, continuously. If you're not spending at least 30 minutes a day learning something new that could improve your financial situation, you're falling behind. And I don't mean scrolling social media, I mean intentional study. Read books about investing, about business, about successful people from different cultures. Take free online courses. Listen to educational podcasts during your commute. This is how you increase your value in the marketplace. This is how you go from earning $40,000 a year to $80,000, from $80,000 to $150,000. Not by working twice as many hours, but by increasing the value you provide through knowledge and skill. Let me share one final story before I give you the complete formula. There was a young woman named Sarah who attended one of my workshops 3 years ago. Sarah was 26 years old, working as a receptionist, earning $32,000 a year with $40,000 in student loan debt. She felt completely hopeless. During the workshop, I taught these exact principles: the rule of thirds, the power of giving, the importance of continuous learning. Sarah approached me afterward and said, "Rabbi, I can barely pay my rent. How can I possibly save or invest anything?" I told her, "Start with $1 a day, just $1. She looked at me like I was insane, but she committed to try. Every single day, Sarah put $1 into a jar. At the end of the month, she had $30. She divided it into thirds: $10 into savings, $10 into a micro-investment app, $10 to a local food bank. She did this for 6 months. Then something shifted in her mind. She realized that if she could do this with $1, she could do it with $2, then $5, then $10. She started reading financial books from the library. She took free online courses in digital marketing. Within 18 months, she had switched jobs and was earning $52,000. Within 36 months, she had paid off $15,000 of debt and had $4,000 in investments. Last month, Sarah sent me a message with a picture of her first investment property, a small condo she purchased with an FHA loan using the savings principles I taught her. She's now 29 years old and building generational wealth, all because she started with $1 a day and ancient wisdom. Here is the complete formula. Write this down, memorize it, teach it to your children. First, divide every dollar you earn into thirds. 1/3 for stability and assets, 1/3 for growth and opportunity, 1/3 for liquidity and security. Second, immediately give away 10% of everything you receive, not after your bills, not after your expenses, but first. This creates the flow of abundance. Third, invest 30 minutes every single day in learning something that increases your marketplace value. Fourth, track everything. Write down your decisions, your learning, your progress. What gets measured gets managed. Fifth, be patient. Wealth is built in decades, not days. Trust the process even when you can't see immediate results. And sixth, teach these principles to someone else. When you teach, you reinforce your own understanding, and you create a community of people committed to the same wisdom. I want to be very clear about something because this is important. This formula is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not magic. It requires discipline, consistency, and faith. Not necessarily religious faith, but faith in the process. Faith that small actions compound over time into massive results. I've seen people quit after 3 weeks because they didn't become millionaires immediately. Those people will stay trapped forever. But I've also seen people stay committed for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and every single one of them experienced transformation. Not always in the way they expected, but always in ways that mattered. Some achieved financial freedom. Others achieved peace of mind. Many achieved both. The ancient wisdom doesn't promise overnight miracles. It promises lasting change for those willing to walk the path. Let me tell you what's at stake here. If you continue doing what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. If you're satisfied with that, then you don't need this wisdom. But if you're reading this because something inside you is hungry for change, for breakthrough, for a life that's different from the one you're living right now, then you have a choice to make. You can dismiss this as interesting information and go back to your normal patterns, or you can decide that today is the day everything changes. Not tomorrow, not next month, not when conditions are perfect. Today, with whatever you have right now. I'm 52 years old. I've spent 3 decades studying these ancient texts, testing these principles in my own life and the lives of hundreds of others. I've made mistakes, I've had failures, I've experienced setbacks. But I can stand before you today and say with absolute certainty, this wisdom works. Not because I'm special, not because I'm particularly gifted, but because these principles are based on truth, mathematical truth, psychological truth, spiritual truth. And truth doesn't change based on your circumstances or your background or your current bank account. Truth works for anyone willing to apply it consistently. So here's my challenge to you. For the next 90 days, commit to these principles fully. Divide your income into thirds. Give away 10%. Spend 30 minutes daily learning. Track your progress in a journal. At the end of 90 days, measure your results. Look at your bank account. Look at your debt. Look at your opportunities. Look at your mindset. I guarantee you will see changes that surprise you. And if you do this, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment below sharing your 90-day results. Tell me what worked. Tell me what was difficult. Tell me how your life changed. Because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to take their first step. Let me close with something my grandfather told me when I was just beginning my journey. He said, Yosef, that's my Hebrew name, wealth isn't about having everything you want. It's about wanting everything you have and knowing you have the power to create more. That simple statement changed my entire relationship with money and abundance. I stopped chasing. I stopped comparing myself to others. I stopped feeling like a victim of my circumstances. I started focusing on what I could control, my daily decisions, my learning, my generosity, my discipline, and everything else began to fall into place. The ancient Jewish secret to wealth isn't really a secret at all. It's been written down in our texts for thousands of years, available to anyone willing to study and apply it. It's the understanding that wealth is spiritual before it's material, that generosity creates more than hoarding, that wisdom is the greatest asset, that patience outlasts impulse, and that giving is the foundation of receiving. These aren't complex ideas, but they require a fundamental shift in how most people think about money. They require you to trust in principles that feel counterintuitive. They require you to give when you feel you don't have enough. They require you to save when you want to spend. They require you to learn when you're tired. They require you to be patient when everything in our culture screams for instant results. But I promise you, if you walk this path, if you commit to these principles, if you trust the wisdom that has sustained Jewish families through 2,000 years of exile, persecution, and rebuilding, you will experience transformation, not just in your bank account, but in your soul. You'll sleep better at night, you'll feel more purposeful during the day. You'll stop feeling like a victim and start feeling like a creator. You'll build something that lasts beyond your own lifetime. And that ultimately is what real wealth means. The $600 billion fortunes I mentioned at the beginning, the Rothschilds, the Guggenheims, the Warburgs, families that shaped global finance, they all followed these exact principles. But here's what most people don't realize. Those families didn't start wealthy. They started with wisdom. They started with discipline. They started with generosity embedded in their culture. They started with the teachings I've shared with you today. And over generations, that wisdom compounded into fortunes that changed the world. You may not build a $600 billion empire, but you can absolutely build a life of freedom, security, and purpose. You can absolutely break the cycle of financial stress that's been passed down in your family. You can absolutely create a different future for your children and grandchildren. It starts today. It starts with one decision. It starts with ancient wisdom applied in modern life. Go now and begin. Divide your money into thirds. Give away 10%. Learn for 30 minutes. Track your progress. And 90 days from now, come back and tell me how your life has changed. I'll be waiting to hear your story, because your transformation will inspire someone else's beginning. And that's how wisdom spreads, how communities rise, how generational wealth is built, not in isolation, but together, following principles that have stood the test of time. May you be blessed with wisdom, with discipline, with generosity, and with the prosperity that flows from all three. Now go and create the life you were meant to live.